Okay then, ladies and gentlemen, welcome again. Hope you enjoyed teas and coffees break. Beautiful day out there. It's really nice up in that atrium to see a bit of sunshine. Sorry that you're stuck back down here with no natural daylight. But there will still be plenty of daylight when we get out at the end of the session today. So, panel 5, just make sure you're in the right room. Panel 5 is Change for the Better, Workplace, Taking Positive Action. So we've got, it says on the screen there, we've got 3 speakers. We actually have 2 speakers, which gives us the benefit of that we'll have longer for questions and answer session. But our speakers are Sarah Underhill from Anglian Water and Dawn Moore from Morgan Sindall, who'll be joined by her colleague as well. So without further ado, I'd like you to welcome up to the podium Sarah Underhill, who's from the Future Leaders Board of Anglian Water. Wrong way around. Sarah's just changed a little bit in the last minute.
Today I've been mainly Sarah, so
Apologies.
So just before Sarah does come up, I've just been asked just to kind of just set the context for Anglian Water and why it formed the Future Leaders Board. So for those of you who don't know, Anglian Water, we serve about 5 million customers out in the east of England. We've got about 5,000 employees. And every one of those employees, we really value them, and we want to ensure that each of those are respected and treated fairly. And as an organisation, we work with lots of external companies and organisations that help us within that ambition. And as part of that, we've achieved some great success through recognition through things like Glassdoor. But we know we can do more. So one of the areas in particular that we've been focusing on is around diversity and inclusion. So whilst that diversity and inclusion, you may conjure up some headlines in terms of why you might think it's important, I just want to give you our perspective. So that diversity and inclusion absolutely is focused on being able to provide different and diverse thinking into the organisation. And I just want to explain why we think that's important, and it's in kind of 3 key focus areas that we've been looking. So firstly, one of those is we want to be reflective of the customers that we serve. As a public interest organisation that provides drinking water that is essential for life, we want to make sure that as an organisation we can relate and our customers can relate to us. The second key area is we're also looking at future skills and the gaps that we can foresee coming forward, but also how do we attract and retain future skills as we go forward. And the third key reason why we're looking at diversity, inclusion and trying to do more is we think actually it will set us up to be a much more sustainable and resilient business. So I'm sure many of you have heard the kind of term VUCA, the idea of volatile, uncertain, complex and ambiguous. We recognise that actually having diversity of thought within a business puts us in a much stronger position where we're not led by groupthink or effectively business blind spots. So we looked as a board across ourselves in terms of are we diverse enough, and it was obvious that actually we could do more. And without half of us all deciding we was going to leave the business overnight, there were other opportunities to start to bring some of that diversity in. And that's what initially prompted the idea of effectively a youth board. So I kind of put my hand up, I kind of sponsored it from board perspective. We went out, we did some benchmarking, we looked at what was out there. We kind of took references from people like B&Q and colleges and university organisations and looked at what was right for us. So while some of the youth boards that we saw definitely gave a diversity of thought, what it absolutely didn't appear to be was connected absolutely in the business. So we migrated from the idea of just having a youth board into something that we've called Future Leaders, that actually is not only is it aligned in bringing that diversity of thought and applying the principles of inclusion, but actually we're giving it real problems that the board and the business face to tackle, rather than just seeing it as an alternative viewpoint. It's actually helping to drive change. So at that point, I kind of want to introduce Sarah Underhill, who is one of our Future Leader Board members.
Yeah, so thank you, Jason. As I said, my day job is that I actually work in our upstream water resources team, responsible for our groundwater and surface water assets. But last November, I was successful at being selected onto the Future Leaders Board at Anglian Water. And I'm a group of 9 young leaders selected across the business, and this is who we are. And the thing that I want to make about who we are is this is not your traditional group of graduates or interns that might have joined on a development programme with quite similar backgrounds, degrees and education. We went through quite a unique 3-stage assessment process to get on this board to ensure that us as individuals not only reflect our wide array of employees across the business, but we can bring that diversity of thought. And just a couple of examples to draw that out. The first is that through the 9 of us, we represent the wide array of business units across Anglian Water. So we have people from our operational water recycling, through to internal comms, public affairs, through to IT, software, finance optimization, so that when we sit down as a board and start looking at the challenges that we're facing, we can bring those conflicting perspectives from those different business units and actually bring that diversity of thought. And the second thing to note is that we also represent our employees across multiple levels in terms of roles and responsibilities. So as a group, we have a leakage apprentice, we have a network electrician they're both on the front line day to day ensuring that we maintain supply to our customers. We then have junior through to senior managers. We've taken a more strategic view. So again, when we sit down, we can bring those different experiences and those different perspectives of the employees to those challenges we face. And in terms of our purpose, these are some of the areas that we've set out for what we're doing, and I'll just touch on a few. The first is that we are now actively engaged as 9 ambassadors to the business. So we can go out into the business representing some of the initiatives and change that are coming through from management board or from wider stakeholders, and we're there as that kind of voice of the people and to take that from a different level than usually would be. The second one is around engaging in board level activities, and the important thing on this is actually we're there to kind of drive decision making and make real change. And in a couple of slides I've got some examples of some of the deliverables that we've done since last November that show kind of the more strategic scale of what we've been doing. And then the other ones to pull out is around developing leadership skills and professional networks. So we've been working at management board level, so we've been working with our directors, we've also been working with our chairman. So our professional networks in 5 months have grown exponentially, but also opportunities like today. The fact that I've been invited here to talk to you guys and actually understand what's going on around inclusion in the construction industry is just a really good opportunity. So just from my perspective for the board, what is it and what are we doing? Well, the first thing is that we are driving the board from bottom up. So we have come together as a group of quite 9 ambitious individuals, and we've gone, yeah, you've set us a purpose, but actually we're going to set our own vision and our own values that we're going to hold ourselves against. And that's what's listed first of all on here. And some of the words around challenge and be brave is that we recognise that we're in quite a unique position here to really challenge management board on what we can do and what we can change. And the bottom one around delivering our promises is that we're representing employees on this board, so we need to ensure that we make a difference and we make sure that this is sustainable for future groups of individuals going forward. But how does it actually work in practice? Well, we set ourselves up on both operational and management board style meetings, which are chaired by one of the directors of the business. And the core focus of our discussions are around 3 focus areas. So we've been focusing in on diversity and inclusion, customer expectation and corporate social responsibility. And the next slide's got some examples of that. But the 2 things that I find most exciting about the board is one is internal and one is external. And internally, we're starting to be used as a key focus group or a key stakeholder group across the business. So people with different initiatives, so we've had people come to us with culture change, culture capture, we'd love to listen surveys. They're using us as a stakeholder group to kind of challenge some of those ideas and perspectives, either before they go up to management board or before they go out to the wider business as usual. So it's taking a while, but we're starting to get embedded as a group across the business, and that's really exciting. And secondly, we're now starting to sit on external forums, so we can have an influence externally as well, the likes of business in the community, CBI and Ofwat are starting to talk about the potential of developing something like this. So I won't go through all of these, but in terms of just some examples of the more strategic scale of the problems that we're looking at and why it's slightly different from a graduate programme, or kind of the project skills that you'd see. The first is that we have been working across the entire Anglian Water and its supply chain to embed what could be known as a one workforce approach to inclusion. So when you look at Anglian Water, we have our direct employees to Anglian Water, but we have our alliances, our embedded alliances, and then our supply chains. And actually, no matter where you sit within that structure, you should have the same approach to inclusion, and you should have that consistent approach to people. And so we've been working with the leaders of these organisations, getting them in a room, facilitating them to come up with what could be known as a one workforce approach to inclusion. And we've got a sign off of what that looks like, and now we're starting to embed that through the behavioural frameworks and how that can actually be lived in real life. We've been working on stuff around sustainability and customers in the business, but the other one just to pick out is Brexit. So we launched a big project as an organisation on the immediate impacts of Brexit, so what is going to impact water and our supply, so chemicals, fuel. But actually, as an organisation and as a board, we've been tasked with looking at what are the risks and opportunities of wider challenges, so the more immediate and longer term impacts of, say, on the workforce and on attractiveness, and what impact might that be. So they're just a few things that we've started, and that was last November. We've got 18 months on the board, so hopefully we can start driving more change through this process. I've just picked out a few things to say what I think Anglian Water has valued from this so far, and the first is not only have we identified the talent pool for Anglian Water, so we had 120 people apply to get on the Future Leaders Board, which is probably more people than we expected. But secondly, it wasn't your traditional HR talent managers that went through that recruitment process. We brought in senior managers from health and safety, legal, operations, to be in the room assessing that talent. So we now have a visible talent pool across the business, and people can see that now and support those individuals through different meetings and different opportunities that come, which supports the programme for talent development and makes it much more attractive as an organisation, especially as a young woman, to be offered these sort of opportunities as a business. Just to pick a couple more, so it's clear that we're starting to drive real change, and we'll have internal and external influence, and all I can see is this is going to get bigger, and it's continually evolving. We're putting challenges forward around professional leadership qualifications, and how we can impact on wider business and wider employees across the business. So this is only going to change, and we're just 5 minutes in. So yeah, that's the Future Leaders Board at Anglian Water.
If it's okay, we'll do all the questions for both speakers together at the end. Yeah, that's okay.
Next.
Okay.
Just skip to.
Okay. There we go. Okay, so our next speaker is, as you can see from the screen behind me, from Morgan Sindall. Our diversity and inclusion journey. So we've heard a lot about journeys today. I thought the last speaker, from the previous speaker from the last session from Heathrow Airport got journey into there, I thought as well. Quite good coming from an airport. But let's welcome Dawn Moore, the HR Director of Morgan Sindall Construction Infrastructure. Hand over the baton to you. Yeah.
Afternoon, everybody. I can't actually believe it's been a whole year since that photograph was taken. Thankfully, I haven't made the mistake of wearing the same dress 2 years in a row. But I was really proud to see that picture again, because that was me collecting on behalf of Morgan Sindall Construction and Infrastructure last year the Inspiring Change in the Workplace Award. And what I hope I can share with you just in the next few minutes are some of the practical things that we did really to kickstart our journey and some of the results that we've seen. I think, but more importantly, some of the things that we're still doing, because the word journey is absolutely right in my opinion, because it's not complete. We haven't totally transformed our culture, but we've made some great strides forwards, I think, and like I say, we've started to see some good results from it in ways I think in certain areas we probably didn't think was actually possible. You might wonder why I'm starting off telling you a little bit about what we do, but I'll explain that in a minute. So first of all, our construction business. This is actually the first page of that business's strategy for the next 5 years. I particularly encourage you to read the top line because that for the first time does not give you any numbers. It does not give you any detail about the work that business is trying to win, but it actually gives you a strong message about what that business sees as its social purpose. And very similar in our infrastructure business, actually, which is all about building UK infrastructure for current and future generations. Again, the first page of our business plans now are not numbers. It isn't about the work we want to win. That's all in the 70-odd page, not quite 70-odd pages, but lots of pages that sit behind it. But again, the number one priority is delivering a very specific social purpose, which means it's actually very important to us not to only become more inclusive internally, but actually to get much better at working with the communities that we're based in, often for a long time, because particularly in infrastructure, that can be up to 20, 30 years. Why we started our journey internally, though, was much more as a result of self-reflecting, actually. I won't run through all of these, but these are some things that we were faced with back at the start of 2016, and actually probably well before that, but we kind of tried to ignore them a little bit, I think, because some of this seemed too difficult. Particularly points 2 and 3, how long in this sector have we been talking about a sector skills shortage? And one of our challenges to ourselves when we looked at point 3, which was actually the results, I'm not ashamed to say, and I'll explain in a minute, were from our employee survey in 2016. We actually thought, why is it 1 in 2 of our people don't feel respected by the line manager, and why do nearly 25% of our people leave every year? And we sort of thought, are we putting things in place that we don't actually realise create blockers? So is there really a sector skill shortage, or is that a little bit of our own making, actually? And actually are some of the reasons why our employees leave, or actually in some cases don't feel included and respected, part of our own making? So sometimes I think on these journeys, your starting point, and it certainly was for us, is holding a really honest lens up to yourself, and then ask people to help you and give you feedback on what doesn't work and help you change it. So what did we actually do? Well, some of this didn't come easily, particularly starting with that self-reflection lens and challenging what I would call, and still call, some of the very traditional thinking and behaviours. One of the great examples that came from the self-reflection and some of the feedback was about how we recruited, for example. We'd always use the same channels. We were always huge fans of a staff referral scheme. When we actually got into the details of what that staff referral scheme bought, for example, it bought us lots of great people, but they were from exactly the same talent pools as we'd always recruited from. And that was a great example of, to my third point on there, a fact, which actually started a journey around how do we develop a slightly different strategy, which looks at good things like that have always delivered us okay results, actually. But get commitment from senior leaders to actually trying things to supplement that are a little bit different. And that's where things like our returnship programme was born, some of the results of which I'll talk to you about in a minute. We are builders of all sorts, as you know, from the slides that I've shown you, and therefore we do generally like to start simple. And I don't say that as a joke, but actually when you have a lot of legacy in a sector in a business like we did, actually it's much better, particularly for the blockers, as for those of you who are in Ricky Prett's session, he quite aptly described them, I think, who might not believe that actually there's any kind of need to change. So we started very simply based on the employee feedback that we got in 2016 on the simple things that were actually quick wins. One of which was actually enhancing some of our policies, and more importantly, actually looking at the type of language we use that people were actually giving us feedback on was actually quite exclusive. Great example was some of our job adverts, where we always insisted on particular types of experience from particular types of backgrounds, and made no reference whatsoever to the fact that we had started to become more open-minded to talking about flexible working in all forms. And we introduced what I call much more family-friendly job adverts. That started where we could by putting the very simple happy to talk flexible working logo on it. And gosh, did that make a difference by putting that logo on versus those that didn't. And again, I'll show you some of the results of that in a minute. We did start to try and be more innovative in recruitment. Like I say, we'd done some good things really well, but some things we'd never tried, like a returnship programme. And we had to work quite hard on removing what was a cultural barrier in our business. And I'm sure something many of you will resonate with, the real suspicion around flexible working. Could we trust people to do things? Was it actually possible to ever do that on site? People had different perceptions of exactly what that meant. So there's lots of education to do to say this is what it's all about. There is no one size fits all. Here are some examples of what you can do. But more importantly, let's try and get line management behaviours right so that people actually feel they can even have the conversation. Because we've got a written policy, like everybody else. That's not the thing that really works. It's actually the approachability of our line managers who've bought into this that actually does make it work. And again, I'll come on to that in a minute. Interestingly, we haven't set any specific targets. But that's not to say we don't monitor our progress for continuous improvement. Actually, not setting specific targets, for example, more women in the business or other underrepresented groups, actually came as a result from feedback from some of our employees from underrepresented groups, who, when we ran the workshops after that survey in 2016, one of them made a comment that actually sticks in my mind today. And he said, you're not going to fix culture by actually setting any targets, Morgan Sindall. You're going to have to work on rebuilding it. And again, that still really resonates with us because I think that's informed our journey greatly, actually. And it's been great throughout all of the sessions today, certainly that I've attended, to hear more about the fairness, inclusion and respect ambassadors. They're certainly quite key to our journey. I'm an HR professional, I admit that openly. But one of the things this can't be is an HR initiative. We actually see, and I know I've got a couple of my colleagues in the room who are actually ambassadors themselves, this works far better when it's championed by people like them who belong to other functions, who actually work out on sites and projects and show the people who are really out there doing the work, as I call it, that this can work for them. I won't run through all of these other things, but I guess 2 points to make, really. I've called this slide the different strands of diversity. This has not been about targeting specific strands of diversity per se. It has really been about understanding, particularly this year, some of the areas where we are still not doing so well in terms of attraction and retention, particularly areas around disability being one. So we actually are talking to some partners. Working Families is one, the Business Disability Forum is another, not to tell us how to recruit these groups better or effectively how to retain them, but actually how do we change practical things about our business in these areas that make it more inclusive. For example, the Business Disability Forum are working with us on looking at all of our site setups going forward and actually how right from day one, and by day one I mean in the design of them, we can actually make them more inclusive for those with physical and mental disabilities. We also have done some quite specific campaigns, which you can see on there. But I think very significantly, we've started to look at the social element much more. 18 months ago now, we introduced something called Altogether Cumbria, which is our social enterprise model. That's about leaving a long-term legacy, but reflecting the same principles that are important to us around diversity and inclusion in the communities in which we work. And I'm really delighted that an offshoot of that called Creating Careers in Cumbria is actually shortlisted for an award today. But that is a model that we're starting to replicate nationally in partnership with some of our clients. And we are at the point now where employees are involved in sharing their stories with us about the culture change they've seen. And I think there's nothing more powerful than that, actually. So I think that's something worth considering if you don't already have that or do it. I won't run through a lot of the business results, but because you've heard some of them, particularly if you're in the previous session. We've got about 62% of our people benefiting from flexible working now. I have to say most of that's informal. So that's as a result of a conversation with a line manager who is approachable and understands these things about what suits. And that actually goes up and sometimes goes down, depending on the projects that we have. But at any one time, that's about right. I mentioned earlier really simple changes. So where we've monitored this for 2 years now, where we actually allude to being happy to talk flexible working on a job, we've noticed over 2 years that it tends to get 38% on average more applications than ones that don't refer to it. I thought that was quite insightful, and like I say, we've worked to really analyse that over a period of time, so it does make a difference even if people don't ultimately join you. And the feedback that we've had is just simply having that statement says a lot about the culture that you have, and it says even more about it when you don't. very helpful feedback, I thought. The other thing I'd mention is our returnship programme. We started this back in 2017, again as a way of trying to tap into untapped talent pools. I remember the question to me in our business was, how do you know this is going to work? I said, I don't. That's the whole idea about trying to be a bit more innovative and trying something new. But let's try it once and see how it works. We did try it once and we've now tried it twice. And one thing I have to say about the programme, that was a great example and still is of having what I call no barriers. And what I mean by that is we didn't target any particular gender. A lot of returnship programmes are just about women, which is great if that works, ours wasn't. We didn't actually target any particular underrepresented groups or particular ethnicities. We just said, look, and the other important thing is we can also offer flexible working. Over 2 programmes now, we've had 200 applications. Interestingly, a pretty even gender split from both men and women. Quite attracted by the flexible working and all sorts of other bits of support, which includes a phased return to work through the programme. And 74%, unbelievably, of those applications have come from non-white British people, including, interestingly, from a skills shortage perspective, a lot of people who have actually done their training in the sector abroad, but for some reason have found it extremely difficult to get the equivalent job in our sector in the UK. Again, I think that gives some really interesting food for thought, actually, about the challenges as a sector we still have in terms of overcoming barriers. But that's been a great success for us. And like I say, I show that as an example of, I guess, challenging the status quo a bit about how you've always recruited. And don't put any criteria on it. It certainly works in our experience. Again, I won't run through all of these apart from a couple to highlight. First of all, I'll start up in the corner. A picture of a lady you can see, Lena. I really wish she was here today. She describes our culture as, she said, you know, it was really easy for me to raise an idea which I knew was going to change the sector. She said, and the great thing about working for Morgan Sindall is I just felt like I could. And what she actually did as part of our inclusion journey and workshops, actually, was set us a challenge, because she said, there's actually nothing in the sector that gives me stuff that's appropriate to my faith, and there is no faith-appropriate maternity wear for Muslim women. So he said, please design something. So she did. That not only now is adopted across the sector nationally in the UK, it's being rolled out internationally, which I think is fantastic recognition for her. But again, it's that encouragement of approach to sort of challenge how you've always done things and what will make a real change. The best ideas generally come from within, I think, and she's a great example of that. And you might wonder what the middle column is with 3 percentages in red that has no title to it. They are the results from our employee survey last year, where we asked pretty much the same questions as we did in 2016, including how many of our employees felt respected by the line manager. We had an 82% response rate to that survey last year, and this time 90% said they felt respected by the line manager, which was a huge change from 3 years ago. And more importantly, 95% of those employees said they would recommend us to others as an employer. And our voluntary attrition now is 9% and has been roughly around that for about 2 years now. So something has fundamentally changed in our culture, and that survey is anonymous. Our challenge now is to maintain it. It's very easy, as I know somebody mentioned in one of the previous sessions, you get caught up in these things, think you're doing well. A bit like anything, you take it for granted. But it is all about sustaining a positive culture and continuing on that journey. There are still blockers. Actually unlocking those things will actually help us maintain that, I think, when we do this again next year. So they're really my summary messages. I think the journey has to be about everyone. I think there's a belief and commitment which is really important at all levels in our organisation. I think the bottom 2 points, though, really summarise sort of where we've been at. It's not just about us and our internal focus. Really proud of things like All Together Cumbria, which is leaving a legacy of the same behaviours, programmes, initiatives and long-term employment, actually, in the communities in which we work. And it has to be about long-term culture change, not just a one-off initiative. For those of you who've been involved in programme management, how many programmes and projects don't run to time or budget and actually don't have the impact that you thought they would in 10 years' time? This for us can't be like that, and that's the real challenge. And there's lots more for us to do, as I mentioned. And these are some of the things we're working on, some of the people that we're working with. But yeah, like I say, for us, it's a journey that doesn't stop. But over the last 3 years, I'm just really proud of the fact we can actually quantify this now and say to others, you know, sometimes the simple starts are the best. I wish I could present you with a perfect picture, but I can't. But I hope that certainly give you some food for thought, really, about in what people still describe to me as a really difficult sector. And I say, you know, you missed a bit from that sentence. It can be really difficult, but that's also what makes it fantastically enjoyable and a real challenge from a career perspective. You can make this work. Thank you very much.
So Dawn and Sarah and Jason would like to come and join us on the panel now, and then we'll do some questions and answers. Just like to say as well, that's a really refreshing view, because I have this view of, I've always worked in small businesses, and I always think when in small businesses you must be able to change when you want to do, because it's only 25 of you to change. When you look at an organisation in Morgan Sindall, you must employ what, 5,000, 10,000 people, something like that.
Well, in total, it's about 6,000 across the group.
It's a bit of a super tanker, and like how, you know, to change the direction so much and get some of their movement and those stats and those facts over a 2-year period is amazing, which is great. Yeah, so well done. So questions. We've got like 10 minutes for questions, so it's either goes completely dead or we go for a slope off. Well, we'll use the microphone because I know we didn't use it in the last session. It's all getting recorded, so let's do that.
Hi Sarah, I'm from Morgan Sindall. I'm a training manager, and we've got a group called the Young Professional Network that we operate up in Cumbria. And I'm just interested in your sort of network, your leadership programme. Are you sort of looking to integrate with other sort of programmes to do some cross-experience work in that as well, outside of your company?
Yes, we are. So that's where I said that we've touched on a few external boards or groups so far, but we're kind of just establishing ourselves. But yes, we're willing to kind of work with other people and really spread that learning across that young generation, across multiple in construction.
Because I think our group are looking to do similar as well.
I'll just pick up on that point as well, don't it? If Jane's here from the House Builders Federation, she was in the last session, I've got asked to go and speak to their Future Leaders Conference recently, and actually it was all the house builders coming together, a conference of 200, 300 future leaders from the different house builders, all sharing, you know, examples and experiences from their own company. It was a fabulous melting pot, 2-day conference of future leaders from across the whole industry. So, you know, sharing and collaborating like that would be a really great thing to do, yeah. I think we had a question towards the back as well. Bring the microphone down.
Hi, my name's Caroline Budd. I work for Wessex Archaeology. Dawn, I was wondering, you were talking about the change in the way line management was perceived within your organisation.
Yep.
Can you give us a couple of the key points that you think made that change for Morgan Sindall?
I think first of all it was, and it wasn't training, it was, I call them the self-reflection workshops now, where we really took the feedback and had some quite hard days locked in a room reflecting on why they thought what they did, and I think that made some of our very senior managers in particular reflect on some of their own behaviours, how they ran particular projects, how they recruited, that sort of thing. And they just started simple with 3 or 4 areas that I mentioned, like how we recruited and some of the ways we communicated, that they were going to change. And that sent some signals very simply but very quickly to the organisation that there was a desire to do something different. And that was then a great way into engaging employees to actually get involved in making some of those changes as well. So I think there wasn't just one approach, but it made line managers more approachable as a result of that self-reflection, and then being able to genuinely say to employees, look, we've self-reflected, but you need to tell us, have we got that self-reflection right? And if not, what do we need to do differently? So it developed more of a partnership, I would say, than we'd probably ever had on a lot of the things that we did. And that's a constant challenge. We're also a decentralised organisation as well. Some of my colleagues are out here who sort of run projects, but it was really just trying to create the behaviours and the principles in our organisation that no matter where you were, you felt as a line manager sort of role modelled the right things and gave you some tools then that you could take back to your own project or your office or wherever you were and sort of translate them. Does that help? Yeah.
Hi, I've got it's Jennifer Shadford from Anglian Water. I have a question about your returners programme.
Yeah.
It's something that we're looking at introducing over the coming year, and it's really refreshing to see that you're not targeting it at one particular group, maternity returners traditionally.
Yeah.
We're doing the same thing, and one of my concerns at the moment is how do you design a programme that is going to fit simply anyone who might walk through the door? Is that something that you found a challenge, and how did you address it?
We did, but we sort of researched some other returner programmes that were out there and also thought about the nature of our sector. And if I explain about the first 3 months of our programme, that's a mixture of what we call the formal and the informal. So just generally looking at returners as a whole, we targeted people who've been out to work for 18 months or more, so it wasn't the standard leave. And one of the things that we found through our research, and also when we started getting applications from candidates, there was a big thing. For example, they said, look, my main issue is confidence, for example. So I'm going to need some formal support in terms of regaining my confidence as well as getting back into work. So that gave us an idea where we said, look, in month 1, we actually need to do some formal stuff around confidence building. Doesn't matter what background they've come from, that should work. We then looked at where we would possibly have potential work placements and hence permanent jobs for them. And again, we didn't sort of put any barriers or target any particular disciplines, but we said, look, when you've had a career break, one of the things that usually leaves you behind, for example, is IT. So we're going to have to do some formal support on IT. So it's really trying to come up with generic stuff that no matter who you were, it would work for you. The other thing I would say about that is we were also pretty strong already for our own employees on mentoring programmes. And actually, we tried to give that mix of formal and informal support. So what our returners also got was a mentor. So did we find it a particular challenge? I guess not, because we did a bit of research and we also thought about the nature of the groups that we were likely to attract, actually. And then more importantly, after month 1, we asked them. We said, you know, is there anything missing from the first 3 months of this programme, and in some cases beyond actually, that you think you need? And so we do have flexibility in the programme to start to tailor that. A great example, very simply, we're just in our second programme now, and one of the returners has said, actually I'd just like another 3 months repeating the same formal support that you've already given me, because I don't feel I'm quite there with the confidence, some of the IT yet. That's absolutely fine. We can make that happen. So I think it's having flexibility in your programme as well is quite important.
Really helpful, thank you.
One more question.
Hi there, it's Alistair Henderson from Bam Nuttall. Sarah, Jason, I'm interested in the dynamic between the board and I suppose what is a shadow board, the young board. How does that work? As a board member myself, I know that having people looking over your shoulder can sometimes feel a little bit threatening. So I'm interested to see how that works. Jason, perhaps if you could tell us your version, and then Sarah, the unvarnished truth at the end of it.
Openness and transparency is the key words. So, so when we wanted the Future Leaders Board to actually make a difference, initially I kind of volunteered to chair, to act effectively as that link and conduit, with the intention that actually, rather than looking at just effectively over the shoulder of each other in terms of a paper that's presented at the main board, you know, what would the alternative view be at the Future Leaders Board? Does the decision match or is there some difference? Is actually start to delegate to the Future Leaders Board some of that decision making. So some of the things that we are going to be starting to look at is we're reviewing things like our acceptable use of IT policy. So we're going to be looking at the Future Leaders Board in terms of actually taking that away as a credible piece of our governance. We're also looking at where we think you know, the future leaders would point us in terms of internal audit. So we're going to be giving them an opportunity to kind of say, actually, as you build your audit schedule with your internal auditors, we think this is an area that should be audited. So there's going to be a high degree of trust, and we're going to find our way through some of that. But I've got the sort of joyous job of kind of being that conduit to make sure that, you know, we are delegating and asking them to be part of the decision making and make a difference, rather than just looking over each other's shoulder.
And yeah, I guess building on that we've not had any defence or any barriers from management board. They're very approachable, and we've actually spent quite a lot of time with them to have those conversations. So it doesn't feel like we're coming in as a challenge group. Actually, that they're willing to listen to some of our ideas, and we're discussing how we can get more connected to them going forward. So actually, could we have a seat on the management board and one of us represent and be part of those conversations, as well as taking on some of those challenges and delivering some real change, how we can influence some of those decisions at that level as well. So I hope you're not defensive with us. Hasn't felt like that.
Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you for that. Okay, we've got time for one more question if there is. If not, it's a 6-minute walk upstairs. It's like okay. Let's put our hands together and thank all the speakers. So in terms of what next then, our next speaker is going to be a keynote speaker, who's Gillian Unsworth, who's the head of the Gender Pay Gap Reporting from the Government Equalities Office. Gillian is going to start speaking in the theatre upstairs where you were this morning at 3:45. And then at 4 o'clock, we're going to have the awarding of the Inspiring Change Awards for 2019. So, 5 minutes to get upstairs and join the room. Thank you.
It was very good, by the way, on doing that. Thanks to me.